We were speaking of Savitri as a living truth, where words and sounds are used as a vehicle to communicate to the human consciousness a living power. These may sound like sometimes like cliches or words born out of sentiments. There are some people who are very strictly scientific. They say, oh, this is all words and sounds containing power. But there are so many of us, quite a few at least I know, who had such remarkable experiences with Savitri. And just a couple of these experiences were not even reading, not even word and sound, just the contact with the presence of Savitri. Mother says in one of her passages that the time spent in its atmosphere is never wasted. Just the atmosphere. And I know of there are quite a few, but one of them that comes straight away to the mind, a true incidence. The person himself has narrated this to me, and he is not a sentimental person. He is done well in life and quite intelligent. Some of us may have heard this story through him and may know him, but I won't name. So he was traveling by air and suddenly he had a severe bout of air sickness, and we know how frightening it can be. It went to an extent where he felt that he must send word that either return it or land it, because it was really beyond his control. And just then he had this little book Savitri with him. In a state of utter helplessness, he just held it in his hand and put his head over the table with the book in his hand. Strangely, he passed off into a sleep and got up after half an hour feeling fresh, free of fear. This is a real story. It's not a story at all. I myself had such interesting experiences of other people reading this. This is not a book. It's a living truth. And if just holding it in one's hand and relating with can have such an effect, what would be the effect if one were to receive and absorb just the sounds, leave aside the meaning? These sounds go directly, and at some point we may understand nothing, but these cells, there is a very interesting line in Savitri when he says, as when the mantra sings in yoga's ear, and it stirs the blind brain. The brain is blind. It stirs it. And then Aurobindo says, the ignorant cells hold the sound. Even at the level of the cells, the sound is held. It doesn't matter whether we understand or it doesn't understand. The power is there. The sound and the word are vehicles to communicate it to us. And very often when we understand little, perhaps we are much close to understanding it in the true sense. Besides, who can really understand Savitri? It's born of an experience of an extraordinary kind. And I suppose if anyone claims that he can understand Savitri or explain it line by line, he is either fooling himself or, fooling himself. So, such a claim would be preposterous. Leave aside trying to correct word and line and passages. We can receive it, and the more we receive it, it reveals itself to us. And this revelation has no limits, because this is the word of the infinite. As we receive it, revelations upon revelations grow upon us, just as revelations upon revelations mount into Ashupati, and he reveals them to us. In the process of this revelation, Ashupati is taking us through the journey of the Supreme, because actually this voyage, we think it's our voyage, but even before us, it is the voyage of the Supreme, who chooses the minutest atom as his abode. And that's why in such detail, Aurobindo is taking us through the eyes of Ashupati, on the journey of the cell, one may wonder, what has yoga got to do with all this knowledge? Have we not read enough of it in biology? All this has to be left aside because now we have to do yoga. Yoga has to do with soul, spirit, eternal, divine. Why do we read about cells? Maybe in a certain kind of yoga we may not really need to bother much about the cells. But in a yoga which goes to the perfection, to the extent that the very cells must be transformed and they must be resplendent by that flame, it's important to know them. How they have evolved, how they have grown, what are the forces that have kneaded matter, how each energy of life has touched matter and awakened in it a response. In many ways it helps us. First, it helps us to locate ourselves. Every time something happens within us, because we often use terms very loosely, sincerity for instance, another word which is used in spiritual language in a way differently from Aurobindo is purity. Most often when people use the word, they mean moral purity. But Aurobindo and the mother have used this word in a very, very different sense. Purity is to be under no other influence than the divine. Far more difficult than just moral purity. And these cells, for billions of years, we are just reading a little fraction of what has happened in the 5 billion years since Earth's crust cooled down. For billions of years, they have been kneaded by life forces. They have been under the influence of the life force. Several layers of experience have been buttressed into them. And though we don't remember, the cells remember it. That's why the mother pays so much stress when she speaks of that for millions of years they have been used to suffering, they are used to responding in one way. And when she tries to change them, they say, no, no, no. We know only death, we know ignorance, we know unconsciousness. We don't know grace. And how beautifully she speaks of the role of the mantra to change the cells. Because that sound, if nothing else, imprints itself again and again on the dim, ignorant cells, its sound. So, it opens door to a totally different kind of a yoga. For many, many millenniums, trillenniums, these cells have been molded by forces of life which had a purpose at that point of time, as Aurobindo tells us, because otherwise there would have been no start. One could not have straight away, when we start a car or a vehicle, we don't straight away start it in 4th gear or 5th gear. It has to be started in a modest way. The engine is switched on, then 1st gear, then 2nd gear, then 3rd gear. So similarly, when life force starts in the little cell, in matter, it starts with its modest start. And what is this modest start? Life feeds on matter. This is the first form of life. The first unicellular organisms or the trees, they feed on matter and soil. Then we see as complexity develops, life feeds on other life forms. It's very interesting. These are the two levels. Life first draws sustenance from matter. And it opens doors to many, many kinds of understanding. For instance, herbs as curative. They have a property in them which nourishes the vital physical layer of man, which many illnesses lodge themselves in that layer, physical illnesses. And there are herbs which contain Dravya Guna right from beginning. They have an instinctive knowledge within them because the same wisdom which has awakened in man and seeks spiritual light is there in the plant and in the cell and has worked at that level in its own way. And just as the divine beauty, his ananda, his sweetness, his light, they run hand by hand with darkness, the pull of the inconscience. At each level we find it. So even at the level of the unicellular organism, we see this light, this rays. There are cells which are so beneficial. There are bacteria which are helpful to us. Now we know it. That's why this old tendency of blasting away all bacteria is not good. There are bacteria which are helpful. And we know it and we use this knowledge to purpose. There are yeast which are helpful. But there are equally those which are destructive and harmful. And the mother explains this in such a simple way. She says, my child, what you call as bacteria and viruses are nothing but materialization of a certain kind of will. This will suddenly takes a cloth, a form and appearance, and it attacks us. Now if we understand this secret, we can actually work on it purely at the level of will. We can have a contrary will, a will for life, for light. They cannot thrive there. We were just reading, these are creatures which perish with light. They thrive by the night. Death is their food. And if we can live with that consciousness, they can go away from us. There are many, many practical implications. And of course, the most difficult implication is that when the process of transformation touches these layers, it has to tackle those energies. Layer by layer, it's the most, as they say, the beautiful stage of yoga is the womb stage and the comb stage, when one is working towards psychic efflorescence. It's so beautiful. But when the energies of this yoga work upon the different layers of a being, this has to be tackled, changed, modified, transformed, integrated with the rest of the consciousness. And that is why Aurobindo is taking us on a long journey like a most wonderful guide. So yesterday we read a little bit about the very first layer, the unicellular organism, the plant, the trees, where we have some beautiful things where God's delight breaks through the tree, the flower, the leaves. But also we have dangerous and poisonous things side by side moving together. The inconscient and the light, they raise together at all levels. Things that destroy this creation and things that nourish it and take it higher. So we climb to the next level, where in the field of life itself, the first stirrings of life in matter, we have the next kind of creation, the basic animal kind, the insects, the reptiles, and how those energies also are in us, just as the energy of the unicellular organism, which knows nothing but sensations. That's why when we wake up from sleep and when children start their life, the first life is a life of sensations. They don't understand anything, it is there. And we also, when we wake up from sleep, we awake with sensations. The meaning and all this comes later. So next level is little more than sensation. There is a perception. There is no conscious meaning, no real feeling, but perception. And these are the, where just by perception there is an action, reaction, a nervous impulse, and that we find here on page 141. The next level, then came a fierier breath of waking life. So first level, it's completely almost asleep, obscure. But then comes a sense of wakefulness, as if it is awake. And there arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of a thinking sense. We are turning over from page 141 to 142. The strange creations of a thinking sense. Existences half real and half dream. A life was there that hoped not to survive. Beings were born who perished without trace. Events that were a formless drama's limbs, and actions driven by a blind creature will. A seeking power found out its road to form. Patterns were built of love and joy and pain, and symbol figures for the moods of life. An insect hedonism fluttered and crawled and basked in a sunlit nature's surface thrills, and dragon raptures, python agonies, crawled in the marsh and mire and licked the sun. What a line this is! Crawled in the marsh and mire and licked the sun. That sun nourishes this soil. They cannot lift their eyes to the sun. These creatures are asleep during day. They cannot, because they are creations of half night. But they lick the sun, they lick the little light which is trapped inside the marsh. That licked the sun. Huge armored strength shook a frail, quaking ground. So who discovered the dinosaurs? And Sri Aurobindo speaks of that era and how it is completely wiped off now without a trace. Huge armored strength shook a frail quaking ground. Great puissant creatures with a dwarfish brain and pygmy tribes impose their small life drift in a dwarf model of humanity. Nature now launched the extreme experience. So for 5 billion years, Sri Aurobindo compresses in a few lines, and each line we can say is really a subject not only of discussion. People have made films on a single line. One can almost summarize the movie Jurassic Park and Lost Ground in this one line. Huge armored strengths shook the frail quaking ground. And how a small dwarf brain, which is just reacting and acting. But this dinosaur is dead, extinct. But something of him lurks in our cells. This is the problem. It would have been very nice that he would have been extinct, and just as in the cinema world, we are rediscovering what the world lost. It's a very interesting symbol. It's a rediscovery of the past, and this is happening at many levels. At the level of history, at the level of biology, at the level of physics and chemistry, we are going backwards and rediscovering something. And this rediscovery is part of the yoga of nature. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it, that it was necessary that the past be completely unearthed and integrated. So even in history, we are going back to way past. All the battles that were fought 500 years back, 1000 years back, all the great ideas that clashed and we thought they were resolved, they are being coming up again, and they have to be reintegrated with the new life. So it exists even in us. On page 142, the last two lines, 386. A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, had wrath and joy and grief. This is the source of all these things in us. We understand it should not be there, but we become helpless slave to it. A mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were needed by the shocks of sense. Just about a few decades back, we had shocks of sense, a mind that decided what people were based on the color of the skin. Amazing. We can't imagine that humanity was so primitive. Even still it is. That if the color of skin is dark, it's black, it's a bad humanity. And if the color is white, it's a good humanity. And even now, how often we can be misled. Even now, even here, we have in marriages, color of skin. What is it that is governing it? A mind, which is simply by the shock of sense, deciding things. If something that is appealing to the senses, it is good. And how we can be deceived? So it's there even in us, as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were needed by the shocks of sense. There is no deeper reflection. Simply sense, and it appeals to the sense, and we say, this is fine. Often, much to our disappointment, we discover, too late often. It captured not the spirit in the form. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It doesn't care. It just sees the surface and decides. Even recently, as late as few days back, we had a controversy based on surname. Now, things can go to such levels. Thankfully, this at least didn't happen in India. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It looked not for the power behind the act. It happens in India also, but why I said is that if it happened in India, all the media would have shown it as, that look what is happening in India. But when it happened somewhere else, still only India has to react to it. This is the beauty of our media. It captured not the spirit in the form. It looked not for the power behind the act. It studied not the hidden motive in things. not nor strove to find the meaning of it all. And now we have even about the human level. This already has built a background, how this consciousness works in us. And even when we wear a human mask, Bhartari has given a very nice, he has written this Century of Life, Sri Aurobindo has translated it, full of wit and humor and profound wisdom captured in those, this 100 septets, those 100 verses. And very beautifully in one of the verses he says, there are many of us who, don't have a tail, don't have horns, and don't eat grass, and have a human form, but nevertheless are animals. It's such a truth of our own life. Sri Aurobindo is telling us in a little more, nice way to us. Beings were there who wore a human form. Absorbed, they lived in the passion of the scene. Even now this is in us. If something happens outside this sensational event, for days and weeks, that sensational event, even if it be something like, one was passing by and one saw something, one is absorbed in the passion of the scene. What powers were behind, what was the force behind it, what was its deeper meaning, significance, nothing. Beings were there who wore a human form. Absorbed, they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived. Content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. How many human lives are lived at that level alone? Well, in all of us something of this is there, but there are some for whom this is all. There is no deeper meaning to life. It lived from day to day, from scene to scene, from one event to another event. In fact, it seems our entire media is governed now with this lower vital world only. There is very little of any deeper things. Though change is coming, of course. Life had for them no aim save nature's joy and the stimulus and the delight of outer things. Identified with the spirit's outward shell. Nothing but body and the body's thrills. This is all this world knows. At that level it is justified because the soul is not awakened. But at human level, humans have to struggle against this tendency because it's there in us. They worked for the body's wants. They craved no more. Even 20-30 years back, I think even now in a large majority, why should one study? To get a good job. Some days back, people were not, now good job is a decent way of saying it. They used to say, after all, for feeding yourself, we are working. How horrible this is. The very idea that one is working only so that one can sustain oneself. This is the level which was so prominent just a couple of decades back, and even now, in spite of all this knowledge, we still feel that our children should ultimately be capable of not only feeding themselves, but feeding 10 others, and that is the sign of success. So Sri Aurobindo is reminding us, who are these beings? They worked for the body's wants. They craved no more. The veiled spectator watching from their depths fixed not his inward eye upon himself. This is the sign of success. That's why Sri Aurobindo says later on, in this world, through so much waste, some little good was done. And what was regarded as success was a failure from the inner point of view. The most successful being from this point of view is still only at the lower vital and even the lower rungs of the lower vital, and therefore it's a failure. The veiled spectator watching from their depths fixed not his inward eye upon himself, nor turned to find the author of the plot. He saw the drama only and the stage. He saw the event and what happened and kept narrating that. Why it happened? Was there a deeper meaning, purpose? What do I have to learn from this? It is irrelevant. There was no brooding stress of deeper sense. The burden of reflection was not there. Mind looked on nature with unknowing eyes, adored her boons, and feared her monstrous strokes. Again, us. All that we want is even God should give us things for our body's wants. And the only God we regard as God, if He can just satisfy our body's wants, if He can give me house, if He can give me car, if He can make my children capable of earning good income, we say, wow, wonderful God. We don't realize many times we are worshipping another God. Aurobindo will tell us in the next canto. These nether gods grant these things. But nothing deeper that we don't want. So here he is telling us, adored her boons and feared her monstrous strokes. If I do this, God will be angry. There was a person who was caught in such a thing. Oh, mother will be angry if I have kept a blessing packet there. Such absurdities it can go. That mother will be angry, mother will give this way, that way. Of course she will give, but this mind can only relate like that. It doesn't know any other way to relate. It thirsted not for the secret wells of truth. It pondered not on the magic of our laws. It thirsted not for the secret wells of truth, but made a register of crowding facts. Statistics governs this world in everything. And that is why Mother warned us. It is the hour of the incalculable, of the unexpected. So when Wall Street collapsed and the share market collapsed, many people were wondering why it happened. This was not to be. But she is precisely pointing out that this whole world, which we were looking only through the eyes of crowded facts, this is going to collapse and new things are going to come in their place. Or sloth it hunted and it fled and sniffed the winds, or sloth inert in sunshine and soft air. This was the highest one could think. If I can sleep in little sunshine, or if breeze is light and I can relax in it, this was the height of relaxation. We could not think of anything higher. It sought the engrossing contacts of the world, but only to feed the surface sense with bliss. Now we will recognize more and more of ourselves. And Aurobindo is reminding us, this is what we still are. And we expect that by a magic wand will be transformed into some superhuman beings. These things are there in us. We are still engrossed in the surface scene, and we move from scene to scene only just to feed little bit of happiness. These felt life's quiver in the outward touch. They could not feel behind the touch the soul. Only outwardly. If you express things, even now, you are very fine. If you feel deep inside, what is the motive, intention? That is irrelevant. If you give a gift, it must be a big gift, it must look good, it must be showcased well, then people think it's a good gift. If you carry a single flower or a beautiful thought or a lovely feeling in the heart and say, this is what I have got for you for your birthday. What? I want to read a poem for you. Outside people don't say much. Inside, what is this? This fellow is crazy. Thankfully, not in Pondicherry. Really, it's a paradise where such things are valued. But outside, we cannot imagine if somebody goes to occasion and says, well, what have you got for me? I have got good wishes from my heart. Oh, good wishes, what am I going to do with them? Because this world only knows the outer. So Aurobindo is telling us, they could not feel behind the touch the soul, to guard their form of self from nature's harm, to enjoy and to survive was all their care. This goes on, and on page 144, next page, we have a further description of this world. Though we are human beings, but still, how close we are to an animal humanity. Mother very beautifully summarized it. Man has one leg in animality, the other in humanity, and yet he is a candidate for divinity. So, we are very happy about the candidature part. But truly, if we look at ourselves, we are really not even human beings in the true sense. How much animal we are, if we read this, we will really find it's so different from our whole view of life. Line 455, last 5 lines on this page 144. An animal in the instinctive herd, pushed by life impulses, forced by common needs. I have omitted the few lines above because we have just emerged out of that, where Aurobindo describes they made of human selves their helpless prey, and a line above, and gods with slaughter, plunder, rape and fire. Fortunately, in today's world, these things we have come to abhor. Publicly and collectively, the conscience of common humanity has begun to abhor it. But just a few decades back, this was the way of life. But today, at least, the large mass of humanity does not openly accept that this is a way to live. Plunder, making another human being their slave. Though we exploit them, we don't make them slave, but we still exploit them. We do it, and that's why no wonder there is revolt. Wherever a man can, he exploits. So, that we have omitted, and we have come to what is still there. An animal in the instinctive herd, pushed by life impulses, forced by common needs. Each in his own kind saw his ego's glass. All served the aim and action of the pack. And now this line may shock us. Those like himself, by blood or custom kin, to him were parts of his life, his adjunct selves. Somebody asked Aurobindo that, what is it after I am doing yoga, I have begun to, the family ties, I don't feel so strong about them. So much even in current spiritual literature is given towards family ties. You must take care of this, that, duty towards family members is almost enjoined as a part of spiritual duty. Mother said those who have turned to yoga, they have no other duty except duty towards the divine. It's very difficult to take for the usual thought. But if we really look at the root of it, what is this duty towards family? It's a law of society. I mean, it's not something one can understand. If one says there is a duty towards humanity, that's understandable. But why only the family? So when this person asked Aurobindo that, I don't feel this kind of a family tie and family affiliation, Aurobindo says it's a release. It's something very happy, it's a release. And then he says, family ties are usually held by tamasic bonds, and it's quite natural that they drop away with yoga. This is one of the things people experience. As they grow in yoga, the family ties are only the ties that are held by surname, language, state, and I need not elaborate, but they are there. How foolishly that we relate still on that basis. Aurobindo is telling us, look child, if you want to do it, do it. But this is a very, very primitive layer. Sheep do it, goats do it, not human beings. Those like himself, by blood or custom kin. To him were parts of his life, his adjunct selves, his personal nebulas, constituent stars. So we have the whole, patriarchal and matriarchal family where he is the head and everybody moves around him, and one is very happy that look, everybody has respect for me, or the grandsire is respected by all the relatives and feels very proud to die in that state. He is not even emerged from the animal state of living. It's a tragedy and an irony. And yet one thinks very great. His personal nebulas constituent stars. My relations have a lot of respect for me. Satellite companions of his solar eye. As I have been saying, Savitri has tremendous humor in it. These are lines which are full of subtle humor and the irony of life. His personal nebulas, constituent stars, satellite companions of his solar eye. Everybody believes I am the sun in my family. Doesn't know that outside his family nobody even cares. A master of his life's environment. A leader of a huddled human mass. So we see the politicians parading with a huddled human mass saying Jai Ho, and believing that we are so great. What is this mass? They are swayed just by giving a little money. Unthinking, unreflecting mass. And one feels one is a leader. How absurd. A master of his life's environment, a leader of a huddled human mass. Herding for safety on a dangerous earth. He gathered them round him as if minor powers to make a common front against the world. No wonder Aurobindo discouraged his disciples from joining politics. And Mother said, politics of today is one of the most ugly kind. It's a very low kind. Why? This is the politics. Caste politics, creed politics, color politics, based on common mass. We must defend ourselves against another common enemy. Whether there is an enemy or not, we don't know. And there's the kind of politics which is still rampant. And so long as the collective will of humanity does not reject it, the world will be what it is. This is a struggle going on, and this is the kind of politics still practiced. That's why they said the two things which are the last to change are finances and politics, because it's still based so much on the lower vital. Or weak and soul on an indifferent earth, as a fortress for his undefended heart, or else to heal his body's loneliness. In others than his kind he sensed a foe. This is the other extreme. One forms a huddled human mass. We will see, it's very interesting. This is no different from fishes. Fishes, there is a small fishes, how do they defend themselves against sharks and whales? They move in formations, and if you really watch, it's very amazing. Thousands of fishes will come together and move in such a precise formation that when they hit a shark or a whale, it feels it's one body it is hitting. And the shark and whales turn away because it's such a huge formation. Huddled human mass. So we have here a description of that. Or else the other is, it feels, scared of every contact. The typical paranoid who shuts and isolates himself in a solitary world and begins to believe everybody is my enemy. Everybody is out to hurt me. This is the world from which his paranoia derives. That's why it's so difficult to go. In others than his kind he sensed a foe, an alien unlike force to shun and fear, a stranger and adversary to hate and slay. Or he lived as lives the solitary brute, at war with all he bore his single fate. There are people who believe that everybody is out to harm them, and there is no way you can convince them. So they are all the time blaming this or that person for whatever is happening in their life, and it go to absurd level. That even if they get up in the morning and by chance they trip over and hurt themselves, they'll say it is because somebody has done this mischief on me. Absorbed in the present act, the fleeting days, none thought to look beyond the hour's gains, or dream to make this earth a fairer world. This is a tall cry for this world. It is very happy and content to breathe, to live and act, absorbed in the present scene. This is its happiness. To tell this world that, look, we can make this earth a beautiful place. Oh, you are a madman. You must have been contaminated by those mad people at Pondicherry ashram. This is how, because Only here they have these crazy ideas of world transformation. At the most, think of yourself. Somehow you must defend your life, and at the most, think of nirvana. This is good enough. Don't talk of world transformation. Only madmen dream of this. Not sane thinking humanity. This is the sane thinking humanity Aurobindo is describing. Or felt some touch divine surprise his heart. The gladness that the fugitive moment gave. The desire grasped. The bliss, the experience won. Movement and speed and strength were joy enough. How fast we can go. Today we are dining here. Tomorrow we shall be dining at another place. Third day we will try our palate titillated with a third hotel's place. A new dish. This is the adventure. To try a new adventure of the soul. Oh, don't talk such things. Speed and thrill of the flesh. And bodily longings shared and quarrel and play. Aurobindo says a lot of quarrel derives from these powers. And it's very interesting. We will read in these godheads how they push human heart into this play. We are fine one moment, suddenly you will find two people suddenly entering into a quarrel for no reason at all. Both were very nice few moments back. Next moment they are quarreling and fighting with each other like anything. Aurobindo says the roots of most of these quarrels are in the petty lower vital. This is the part which makes us quarrel. So next time we quarrel, we must remember we are under its grip. And tears and laughter and the need called love. What is love at this level? A need. It's not something beautiful and flaming in the heart. It's not even giving. It's a need. One clutches it. In war and clasp, these life wands join the all life, wrestlings of a divided unity, inflicting mutual grief and happiness in ignorance of the self forever one. And people who live at that level like this life. They are very unhappy if life is full of peace and quiet, like that movie Life Can Be Beautiful where everything is fine. They feel something is wrong. If there is no quarrel, they feel unhappy. There must be some quarrel after all. Otherwise, how do we know that we are alive and we love each other? So this is the level at which this happens. On the next page, Aurobindo tells us this is also kindergarten of nature school. We may think we are very grown up, we have done MA, PhD, etc., etc. But from nature's point of view, we are still in the kindergarten and the nursery. So on page 146, third line from above, so must the dim being grow in light and force. This is how he starts. He thinks this is love, this is laughter, this is happiness. After a while, that illusion is broken. Why? Because the divine says, you have already done this class, don't sit in this class, you have to go to next class. Even if your companions are still there, you have to go because you have moved on. And rise to his higher destiny at last. Look up to God and round at the universe and learn by failure and progress by fall. So in this world, this is the law. It is condemned to doom and failure and fall. This love, this want can never be fulfilled. One will only change forms, appearances, move from one person to another, because this love by its nature cannot be fulfilled. And that is nature's grace. It is divine grace. Because if it was fulfilled, we would never progress. So Aurobindo is telling us, thus must the dim being grow and learn by failure and progress by fall and battle with environment and doom, by suffering discover his deep soul and by possession grow to his own vasts. We'll quickly read, another 5-7 minutes because today we have just one session. We'll quickly read a little bit of a third type of life. These three layers Aurobindo is telling us. The first layer was, we have already read, just the sense contact. The second, perception. The third, where some kind of a reptilian brain and the brain of the bird and beast, which thinks and plans. If we look at a crow, right in front of nursing home. Of all the beautiful images, they had to make that crow putting stone in the water to remind us of Aesop's fable. I don't know why they had to make this. From there we have to look at the crow putting stones. But really, it's very interesting. When Aurobindo, in one of his passing remarks, he says, crows have a thinking intelligence. And he speaks of, says it's not just a story, this is a fact. Because crows actually can think and plan. Now, when I learned science, this was anathema. Crows don't have thinking and logic. Just 2 days back, very interestingly, I was reading something that scientists have discovered that crows can think, and this is not just a story or a fable, and they did an experiment to prove it. Almost nearly 80 years back, in evening talk, Aurobindo passingly makes this remark. And exactly based on this story, and just 2 days back I was reading, scientists have done an experiment. They actually put a beaker and put some thirsty crows around and put some pebbles on the side. So they kept on looking around. It was kind of cage, controlled environment. Then they picked up and actually started doing it and drank the water. So Aesop was right, and much before Aesop, Aurobindo had already told, but scientists are always behind time. They are discovering now. So this is the third level of creation where a thought comes. But this thought is again at the service of small aims. A third creation now revealed its face. The same page, the new movement, 146. Line 524. A mold of body's early mind was made. A glint of light kindled the obscure world force. It dowered a driven world with the seeing idea and armed the act with thought's dynamic point. We can read a little bit from the next page, or the next to next, page 149. A thought was there that planned, page 149, the second line from top, 604. A thought was there that planned, a will that strove, but for small aims within a narrow scope. So we are still at the lower vital when we are planning our share markets, because basically for small ends. This thought is intelligent, but is striving only for small ends, little gains. A thought was there that planned, a will that strove, but for small aims within a narrow scope, wasting unmeasured toil on transient things. This does not mean that we should not plan, but this planning is not for these petty gains. It's for deeper things, for higher issues, even small issues which lead us to higher issue. To take an example, if we have to come from Delhi to Pondicherry, we have to plan. It's not for just, anything. So this is part of that. This little thinking has its role. But it becomes an absurdity when we begin to use this, live only by this mind and only for small aims. It knew itself a creature of the mud. This mind knows itself only as a creature of the mud, nothing more. It asked no larger law, no loftier aim. It had no inward look, no upward gaze. And then what a beautiful line, a backward scholar on logic's rickety bench. This mind has its logic. But where is it seated? It is a backward scholar. That too seated on a bench which can any time collapse, but believes that he is very logical. A backward scholar on logic's rickety bench, indoctrinated by the erring sense. This logic is based only on sense. What it sees, on that basis it judges. Purely by appearances. It uses logic, but purely by appearances. Whether it be small events, circumstances, or the big things, even God it will judge only by appearance. If he is God, he must look like one. He must have 4 hands. As mother has said in one of the places, my child, because I have come like you, you don't recognize me. If I came with 1,000 hands, then you will believe that I am divine. So even God must be like that. It took appearance for the face of God. For casual lights the marching of the suns. For heaven a starry strip of doubtful blue, aspects of being feigned to be the whole. There was a voice of busy interchange. This world is prominent not only in share market but all markets. That's why when we begin to do yoga, it becomes so difficult to go to marketplace. One understands it after reading this line. A marketplace of trivial thoughts and acts. A life soon spent, a mind the body's slave. This is precisely what we find there. The modern market is really typical of this. There the mind is the body's slave. We go there only to get little bit of bodily needs, bodily wants, and that's all. Here seemed the brilliant crown of nature's work, and tiny egos took the world as means to sate awhile dwarf lusts and brief desires. What a beautiful description of our Nehru Street. I mean, it looks so nice, but this is it. And tiny egos took the world as means to sate awhile dwarf lusts and brief desires. In a death-closed passage, saw life's start and end, as though a blind alley where creation sign, as if for this the soul had coveted birth. Again we see a gentle satire of Aurobindo. As if for this is creation speak, this human being. He is telling us, as if for this soul had coveted birth in the wonderland of a self-creating world and the opportunities of cosmic space. This creature passionate only to survive, fettered to puny thoughts with no wide range, and to the body's needs and pangs and joys, this fire growing by its fuel's death. These little joys and wants, the problem of them is they grow by eating upon the fuel's death. When we live by the law of desire, everything that we eat ends up eating us. Scientists are learning with much discomfort to our discomfort that all the things we relished, whether it be in terms of taste or in terms of life context, are harmful. And some people go to this extent that they say, what is life worth living? Obviously, one has still not graduated from the kindergarten, not yet gone into Dalafon of mother's big school. So in nursery, this is what we believe. Somebody asked mother, even gone to this extent. Mother said, in this new world, we will not need to put in something by the mouth to survive. Then somebody asked mother, oh, what will be the joy then? So much joy and satisfaction we derive just from eating. I mean, I am no exception. I am just saying that all of us, this part lives inside. And how much we have to struggle, sometimes through much suffering we learn that this was growing, this fire growing by its fuel's death. That's why mother says in one of her statements, which we understand so much later in life, my child, each sexual act is a step towards death. One wonders. There are scientists who would tell us no. But really it is so true that each desire actually grows by the fuel's death. What is the fuel? The desire burns in this body and eats up this body. Till one day there is nothing left in this body, and finally we have to give it to fire only as a token, because actually it was dead or perhaps never alive. So this is the irony of life. Aurobindo is telling us this creature passionate only to survive, this fire growing by its fuel's death, increased by what it seized and made its own. Even when such a kind lives with another human being, it can devour that other human being. Even there are people who die when they are in contact with such a human being, because this desire feeds upon by the fuel death. That's what these are the beings called as vampires, who live only by this law. And they devour those who live by them and make them sick. It gathered and grew and gave itself to none, because it doesn't know to give. It only eats, 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 pulls, pulls, pulls. Sri Aurobindo says in one of the places that when this kind of a vital turns towards the Guru, it pulls at the vital of the Guru and only eats it. It doesn't know any other law. Only it hoped for greatness in its den, and pleasure and victory in small fields of power, and conquest of life room for self and kin. That's all it wants. Life room for oneself and the relatives, kin. An animal limited by its feeding space. It knew not the immortal in its house. It had no deeper cause to live. So we can stop here for today.